do that one. This is where I appear there.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, right. It's got to go.
There you are.
Hello, everybody. Steve Cole here. Welcome to our second virtual meeting via Zoom. Let's hope the evening runs smoothly. There are a few rules. Please, could you turn off your microphone and your video cameras during the talk, so that there will not be any visual or audio distractions. And if you like to ask any questions of our speaker, which I'm sure you will, please write these using the chat function located at the bottom of the screen. It will appear when you hover your mouse within the screen. And there's a little sort of speech bubbly thing that says chat. You can type in there your questions and I'll put them to Richard at the end of the meeting. And hopefully that will go all right. And then I can now introduce our speaker, who is Dr. Richard Kelleher. Richard came to within an hour of speaking to us last March, when sadly I had to cancel our meeting after a pronouncement from Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, saying that people should not meet. Fortunately, Richard is a patient man and he's able to talk to us tonight instead. Tell you a bit about Richard. He's the assistant keeper of coins and medals at the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge. He studied archaeology at Winchester and museum studies at Leicester before obtaining a PhD from Durham University. He worked at the British Museum before moving to Cambridge in 2013. He lives in Ely. His research interests include the role of coins in archaeology, the use of metal detector finds for mapping monetisation and coin use, the secondary use of coins, and the coinage of the Crusader states of Edessa and Antioch. His major publications include A History of Coinage in Medieval England, and he was the winner of the Royal Numismatic Society's I knew I'd make a problem with that, Lotka Prize in 2015. He is currently working on an art fund-funded project called Currencies of Conflict and Dissent, 1500 to present, which will culminate in a large exhibition at the Fitzwilliam in 2022, which hopefully is far enough away to actually happen. And tonight he's going to talk to us about coins in the late medieval countryside, the Rendlesham Project. So I'll ask Richard if he could share his screen with us now.
Okay, can you see the screen?
I can, yes.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. Well, good evening. Thank you, Stephen, for that lovely introduction. I mean, I was looking in my diary today, the 16th of March is when I was due to speak to you. And within a week of missing out on speaking to your society, we were closed out of the museum for 6 months. And it's basically this year. This year has been, difficult and horrible in lots of ways for everybody. Just even the introduction now is a little bit outdated. I've had a contract change. I'm now called a curator rather than an assistant keeper. And it's interesting to hear that the exhibition was slated for 2022. It still is. It's moved 5 times since. And, we don't know for sure whether it will be pushed into 2023, but fingers crossed that it will happen, I'm assured. And I hope that I'll be able to welcome you as a society to come and see it, because I'd be very happy to give you a special tour as a group if and when the exhibition is up. So, I work in the Fitzwilliam Museum and one of the members of staff in the Coins and Medals department. And my responsibility is to look after the medieval to modern collections. But what I'm going to talk to you tonight about is a group of material that isn't in our museum at all. The finds from Rendlesham, they've been acquired over a long period by Colchester and Ipswich museums. So what is Rendlesham? Well, the Rendlesham material is what is the basis of this recent Leverhulme funded project called Lordship and Landscape in East Anglia, AD 400 to 800. This is a collaborative project between UCL, UEA and the Fitzwilliam Museum. And its approach it's GIS enabled, it's interdisciplinary. We have archaeologists and numismatists, landscape historians, place name studies experts, and material scientists all involved in this project. And the main outcome of the project is going to be a monograph published by the Society of Antiquaries of London, which should, I think, be coming out towards the end of this year. There are also journal articles, online catalogues, archives, talks like we're doing today, and web pages that would be part of that, the outcomes there. So the team is a large one. As I said, so the main players, UCL, UEA, and the FITS, but also include Sam Moorhead from the British Museum, who looks at Roman coins, and there's an advisory board that oversees everything that's being done in the project. What I'm going to talk about this evening, I'm going to divide it into two parts, really. The first one, part one, is to give you an introduction to the project, the sort of the methodologies behind it, and the findings. That this is that Anglo-Saxon stuff. This is why the project exists. It's the amazing material that's come up, dating from the 7th to 8th centuries. But what we're going to do in the second half is to look a little bit more about the kind of material I look at, which is later medieval, and we'll look at the how important this data set is, and potentially is, for discussing aspects of monetisation. And I really think and hope to convey to you tonight that this could be one of the sort of the type sites for looking at the rural economy in medieval England. So Rendlesham. Now, many people would have heard about Rendlesham before, and the reason is it's a place that's cited in Bede. So it's known as a significant place for some time, and it's thanks to this passage in the ecclesiastical history. It's mentioned by Bede as the East Anglian Vicus Regius, where Swithelm was baptized between 655 and 664. Where is Rendlesham today? Well, it's a place in southeast Suffolk. It lies on the east side of the River Deben within the Sandlings, and it's about 6 kilometres northeast of the elite Barrow Cemetery at Sutton Hoo. So it's very topical at the moment if any of you have seen the dig. The Sandlings region formed a territorial focus of East Anglian royal power in the 7th century. Today's village is dominated by, it's like the twin pillars of medieval society, the church and the manor. You can see them on the slide here. The churches of St. Gregory the Great. The manor house dates at least to the 16th century. With the 1930s redevelopment. And William Camden linked Rendlesham with Redwald and Sutton Hoo in his Britannia of 1586. So it has this historic pedigree as an important place. There's a Sutton Hoo helmet. Okay, so why the project now? Well, it's really because of metal detecting, both the good and the bad side. In 2007, the landowner of the Naunton Hall estate sought archaeological assistance in response to illegal metal detecting that was happening on arable land on the estate. And damage was being caused by repeat visits, suggesting that significant archaeological material was being stolen. The response by Suffolk County Council Archaeological Service was to undertake in 2008-2009 a controlled metal detector survey of the area being damaged. This was augmented by limited magnetometry, desk-based assessment of information in the county HER, and a plot of available aerial photography covering an earlier survey from 1982. The initial metal detector survey confirmed a concentration of archaeological material in the plough soil that included coins and other finds consistent with a high status early to middle Anglo-Saxon site, and showed that this spread over a much wider area than was initially thought. In 2009, the metal detector survey was therefore expanded to cover the full Naunton Hall estate, which you can see. I'll put my mouse over the area here. All these fields RLM with a number behind. These are the Rendlesham project data survey area, and then a number of 4 extra fields in the parish next, which is called Ike. Detecting was carried out by linear walking, which you can see in the slide here, with individuals spaced a few meters apart to enable 100% ground coverage in the detector sweeps. fields were walked in blocks as time and conditions permitted. Every arable field but one was completely covered in this way at least twice, although differential cropping, for example, for game cover belts, meant that the entire field might not be covered within the same year. The area surveyed for the project is 172 hectares. It occupies the western side of the parish and also the fields to the south from Ike. So what did these interventions reveal? Well, a dense concentration of archaeological material in the plough soil, including coins and other finds consistent with a high status early to middle Anglo-Saxon site. What I've put on the slide here are some of the sort of highlights, and they're representative of the types of material from this period that have come up. If we look at the coins, first of all, coin A, that is a Merovingian tremesis from Dorstadt. Merovingian coins are found in England in some numbers, certainly in the south and the east of the country, and they are the first sort of imports that come in the post-Roman period. They're used as money, and they inspired the first indigenous production of gold coinage by the Anglo-Saxons, and that's what coin B is. So this is one of the, it's called the two emperors type based on the reverse. If you can see, there are figures just about, I mean, this is a stylized interpretation of a late Roman gold coin, but there are the picture should show you there are two figures. That's one head, that's the other. These are two emperors, and there's like a winged victory behind. So these are one of the first indigenous Anglo-Saxon gold coins. There are a large number of the silver coins. We call them early pennies, proto pennies, but in the literature and tradition, they're known as skeets or shatters. And there's 160 of these from the site, which is a remarkable number. You can see they have sort of Roman stylings with this bust with some kind of diadem. But inscriptions begin to come in, and this one has a little bird on a cross as its reverse motif. So a number of these things, but some interesting stuff which talks to the function of the site and its connection. This is a Byzantine copper coin. So they didn't have no monetary function in England at this time. There's gold, which slowly makes way for silver, but there's no copper until much later. So something else is going on with this, and I'll touch on it briefly later. There are also weights like this to show there's some kind of economic activity, and a number of very high status gold and garnet pieces, a pyramid mount from a sword scabbard, gold and garnet beads, a gold wire bead, and lots of pieces of scrap for metalworking, because there's lots of metalworking going on the site. There's droplets and all sorts of crucibles and material showing that the stuff isn't only being consumed here, it's being produced for this high status site. Also cremations, as you can see here, and a number of Grubenhauser, which one is being excavated in the image in the bottom right there. So over 5,000 objects recovered in that period of survey, 66% are copper alloy, over 2,000 coins, and almost half of all the gold objects are coins from the site. There's been some initial publication before the big monograph comes out, and this article that was in Antiquity in 2016, you can dig that one out. That's a good read. And this map on the right comes from that publication. It gives you a sense of what the site is. There's this oval shape here, which is the main residence area. This is the area that's been detected most heavily because it's produced the most stuff. There are middens, metalworking, as I mentioned, related to that, and then there's other settlement to the northwest and the northeast and the east, with burials associated. So what about the methodology? Well, this site really it's unique in many ways, certainly for looking at metal detector material, because the 4 detectorists have basically kept diaries of all their activities throughout. So we have, statistical evidence of the number of days spent working on the site, days per hectare, how many finds come up per day. And this allows us to kind of produce more robust analytical techniques for looking at metal detector finds. Because if I did a PhD on the later sort of post-Norman material recorded by the Portable Antiquities Scheme, and while there's an abundance of stuff and you can get some good patterns, the problem with that material is it's not, as many of you will know if you've ever done field walking, there is a systematic time limit on the amount of searching you can do in blocks of meters and so on. with metal detectors, you're basically at the whim of the detectorists where they want to go, and they will go back to the places where they find stuff. So it's not we aren't looking at an even material in that sense. But there are different survey intensities, and having this information from the detectorist is vital. So if we look at on the left-hand map there, you can see the red areas are those. This one here is where the map we just saw with the areas, different areas of occupation with the hall and the settlement and so on. So these 3 areas have been particularly heavily detected. The finds per day gives us, this hotspot in the middle here. But once we combine the two, so finds per day per hectare, then we get a more balanced idea. And this I'll show you some maps shortly, which in which this information has been crucial to getting a balanced sense of really where and how these patterns develop. Okay, so what we've been able to do as well is using those sorts of methods is to move away from the sort of traditional dots on maps. So the one on the left, this is a lot of my PhD looks like this actually, which is it's come very far in a short amount of time, looking at metal detector finds. But this point pattern stuff, it's fairly useful because it gives us a little bit of an idea about like where stuff is found and the broad trends that you can see. Now, the central map, this is a choropleth map. Now, before this project, before my involvement in it, I had no idea what a choropleth map was. But what it does, it calibrates the finds made within the fields based on the amount of searching that has been done, which we have recorded by the detectorists. And it helps us to understand, rather than this field has got a load of stuff in it, we want to understand really how representative is that material, how unique, I suppose, is that material. So there's a lot of stuff from the site that's closest to the hall, but actually it's these darker colors, the blues and the reds, that show you something more interesting is happening. And then there's a relative risk probability map on the right hand side, which tells us something about the probability of events and non-events. Now, I haven't done any of that stuff with my coin find yet. Maybe I will, I'm not sure yet. But there's a lot to get your head around to understand exactly how this stuff is produced and what it can tell us. But it's just trying to reinforce that this project is kind of breaking ground in how we look at distributions of metalwork. So this is a summary of the early coinage. Now, there are 4 chronological phases in the early Saxon material. There's this the very earliest stuff of the gold coins and the imported bronze. Then there's this peak here for the primary phase proto penny, so the earliest of the skeets or shatters. Then there's a secondary phase stuff, which this is interesting because it's much lower than we might expect, and I'll show you some graphs shortly that compare this with other data sets. And then the broad pennies, which are always fairly low. So the early EM, this is the periodization that we're using in the project, early medieval 1. And this material is actually being published by Andrew Woods. He works at the Yorkshire Museum. He's a senior curator there. And much of what I'm showing you today has been borrowed with permission from him to give you a sense of what's going on in the early period. But this coins are doing different things. Some of them are being used for display. This one has had a loop attached to the top, so it's being worn. The Byzantine coins show networks of communication because, as I say, the copper coins, they've got no monetary use, but they're coming in for some reason. So they're the links with the site at Rendlesham, really important. They are international. There are coins being used as bullion. This one is a gold tremesis, but it's got another gold coin, fragment of a gold coin adhered to the top of it. And as I mentioned, there's metalworking going on, so that the coins are being used as part of elite production of other forms of material culture. And then we've got straight monetary use. In EM2, we see the emergence of silver. This is a selection of coins from the site, and it shows you the sorts of iconography that we see on the coins. We saw the bird on cross one earlier. This one in the bottom left is known as the Woden monster type. So it's got this face, this bearded face here, and then there is a sort of sinuous curving creature there on the reverse. The Roman inspiration can be seen in a lot of these things with the standard on the reverse of this one, and you'll probably have to take a leap of faith with me on this final one. But there's a bird here holding onto some kind of branch, and this little figure here, there's the eye, the nose, little triangular body, and a cross either side. So it's a figure holding two crosses. So I mentioned how curious this low level of phase 3 coins was for Rendlesham. So if we compare Rendlesham with East Anglia, we can see what I'm talking about. So phase 3 tapers off massively here, whereas elsewhere in East Anglia and most of the rest of England, you see growth between the two periods. So what is going on? I think, and what we need to do is to look at Ipswich, because Ipswich seems to peak exactly when Rendlesham is diminishing. It looks like a lot of the functions of Rendlesham and other sites nearby, like Coddenham, which show a similar profile. Ipswich is replacing, with its access to the sea and its international links, it's taking over some of the importance of those earlier and more dispersed royal centres. So I'm going to move to part 2. Hopefully it's given you just a sense of what has happened before the later medieval period, because what was important, I mean, I got involved in this project before really the Leverhulme part of it, and I was just happy to identify the coins because I knew we had a ton of this stuff. It's coming up in abundance. There's all these later medieval things, and I was happy to identify them because there's something to be. I think I can see the possibilities with this one. So what was the potential? Well, I saw, this systematic detector survey, there's very few projects that look anything like this. It's the largest assemblage of single finds from a rural site. There's the opportunity to investigate patterns of coin loss and so on, the kind of things I've been interested in the past. And we have the PAS for regional and national data comparison. All the finds are recorded to a 10-figure grid reference, so that means we have them to a meter square, so we can look at interesting, hopefully interesting elements of distribution and patterning over time. And in all, there's around about 1,000 coins, which for the medieval period is almost unknown. I mean, if you're into Roman numismatics, they often have, there are some sites that have 40,000 coins. For the medieval period, less so. So that this is a remarkable assemblage. And while there's 1,000 coins from 1066 to about 1600-ish, I suppose it goes on a little bit. There is a sort of cut-off at the end of the 17th century. The main material I'm going to cover today comprises about 485 coins that fit in this medieval period. So what do you do when you have all this material? Well, I just want to give you a little pause for a second and give you a little sense of what medieval coinage was in this period. I think in part 1 we saw a fairly fair representation of how the use of money develops. There are early gold imports, then there are gold indigenous coins, then they become debased over time into silver, and then we see this big peak of production for the shatters. Then from the influence of Charlemagne and the Frankish Empire and Pepin as well, you see the adoption by offer in England of broad flan pennies, is what we call them. So we move away from these short, sort of quite thick, dumpy little coins to broad flan pennies. And that's really the system that is perpetuated all the way through the Anglo-Saxon period and into the Norman period. And really our cutoff point is 1279. Because until 1279, if you wanted a denomination smaller than a penny, you had to make it yourself. And what you do is you cut them into halves and into quarters, into fourth things, farthings. After 1279, big reform by Edward I, There's wholesale reform of what mints are being used, because they're in the late Anglo-Saxon period and Norman period. There are 70 mints operating sometimes. After 1279, there is a gradual reclamation of the process of minting by the crown. So all the way up to by Elizabeth I's reign, there's just one mint. But that process of slimming it down to a small manageable number begins under Edward I. So what he does, he has round halfpennies and farthings, sort of in a permanent way for the first time, and all these large 4-penny groats. Now these weren't successful, actually. They were withdrawn pretty soon after they come out, because I think they were too big for what most people wanted to use money for, but they would make a successful return in the 1350s. So that's what the sort of money looks like. How do we divide it up to make in meaningful ways? Well, we need to periodize the thing. What I did is to divide the coinages into 3 phases and 10 periods. Now the phases represent the kind of blocks of how money was produced. The periods 1, 2, and 3 coincide with being the Norman period, but they perpetuate the late Anglo-Saxon model, where you produce new coin types every 2 to 3 to sometimes 6 years. So the onus was on the coin user. When it's time to pay your tax, you make sure you've converted your coinage into the most recent type, because that is what would be accepted. There's a profit for the moneyer, and the moneyers, they obtain their dies from the central central die cutting workshops in London. After 1158, the system changes, and what we have here are 3 kind of very distinctive periods: what we call the cross and crosslets, the short cross, and the long cross periods. And here, a single type is kind of produced for the whole of that block of time. New money is introduced throughout, but there's no idea of, oh, we have to get the newest type. So these give us very defined dates. So in the 1158, 1180, and 1247 and 1279 recoined, all the money that's in, almost all the money that was in circulation is drawn back to the mints and restruck into the new type. So those are really useful for the sort of analysis that we're trying to do, because it gives you, a short cross penny would have had its life within these parameters. So it's good for dating if you're using them just for archaeological dating, but it's also fantastic for sort of producing these periodization graphs. Things get a little bit more difficult after 1279. So I mentioned how Edward I's reform brings in new denominations. What it also does is there's no recoinage again until it's 1544 we have as a sort of the end date here, but that's not a recoinage, that's debasement, but that does give us an end point. And these recoinages are, well, not recoinages, these periodized periods here, they are defined by weight reductions that happen. And we can see in some of the evidence that, say, for example, an Edward I penny continues to circulate. When new money comes out, some of the old stuff is clipped down, because you don't want to use an overweight coin, because those clippings could be, you're effectively using a bit more precious metal than the next person. And we see coins that are clipped down to come to the new standards. But what that also means, which is a very difficult problem to solve in this sort of analysis, is that Edward I coins can also be circulating, in the 1540s. So while, if we look at the bar chart here, much of this material, in theory, could have been lost in periods 8, 9, and 10. And that is something to grapple with. But I think the way the material from Rendlesham has been gathered, we might be able to do something new and exciting with it. Okay, so there's the potential. What I want to do is just show you some other sites, because I mentioned Rendlesham has the potential to be amazing. There are a few others that have historically been used to talk about monetisation. This is one of the few that we have actually from London. So it is incredibly salient for understanding, money in the city, money use in the city. The problems with this material is it's all like dumped refuse that went into these revetments that slowly reclaimed chunks of the Thames, and the material it wasn't even excavated. There were some partial excavations of places like Vintry and Thames Exchange, but the majority of the finds that are in this graph here, they were metal detected in spoil heaps in Kent and Essex. So the diggers, scoop out all the stuff, the trucks would take it out, and the detectorists would work on it, miles and miles away from where it came from. But that being said, there is some value in this material. Jeff Egan, the late Jeff Egan, who worked at the Museum of London, and Peter Guest, now is a Roman scholar at Cardiff. They worked on looking through much of this material. So, and there's this card index was something I put together from the records that they left at the British Museum. But, I mean, without their work, we wouldn't know anything about this site, other than stuff, coming through the trade saying, oh, this is from this site or not. I think what's notable about this is the early start. So Anglo-Saxon coins, we have 26. That's quite a lot for this period. The Norman stuff in particular, that is a lot. But it does tail off quite significantly up after 1351. And I think when I worked a bit on this, what we were looking at is, there's not much later stuff, because these sort of contexts were sealed about that time, as the revetments were pushed further and further into taking further and further into the river. Another amazing site is Llanfaes in Anglesey. It has a really good representation of short cross coins. You can see here on the graph, on the table there, 332. That is a ton. 135 long cross, but then not much after that, and really not much before. But we know a bit more about this site. It was thought to be the site of the weekly market and the Llanfaes fairs before Edward I, who's has a massive impact on money and all sorts of things. He built a new castle and the town of Beaumaris, and transferred the market there in 1296. That tells us why the coin finds almost disappear entirely, and some of the population was moved to another Rossier, another town. So we have this this important site, but I suppose what the bad thing about it is there's all these finds, but we're relying on the detectorist approximating where the finds were found. So we'll have the field, and and it's not an exact science. So we have an excellent idea of what the things were, but not necessarily where they came from. But this is still an important site because it was abandoned. We have there's nothing built on top of it. We've got most of the material as a comparative site. Dunwich is another important place. We've got stuff falling out of the cliffs. That's where a lot of the stuff that was published by Martin Allen and Steve Doolan comes from. What's really fascinating about this is to look at the denominations, because you can see pennies only 26, halfpennies 54, farthings 136. So it's very much dominated by the fractional coins, and probably indicates that a lot of the stuff that is being collected and published was derived ultimately from an urban marketplace, and I'll discuss why that might be the case in a bit. Another site is South Ferriby in Lincolnshire. This is really the work of one person, one detectorist who worked for 20 years all over the parish. And Barry Cook at the British Museum published all that material. In 1998, the entry in the Domesday Book of 1096 records a church, a mill, and 2 ferries. So it's a fairly minor but economically active site, and was the crossing point for the Humber and port for river traffic down the Alcombe River to Lincoln. So 360 coins in total from there. But again, we don't have where exactly they came from. So where they cluster some sort of patterns of development, we can't see that. This is the last of our comparative sites. This is Bromholm Priory in northeast Norfolk. Important because it had a relic of the True Cross, which was acquired from an English priest who fled the sack of Constantinople. And by 1223, Bromholm is a pilgrimage site of national repute, having been visited by Henry III and Edward II. So this is probably the most like Rendlesham in terms of the approach and the methodology, because there was a load of field walking took place, and the detecting also took place, to sort of field walking standards. I know, so they surveyed the precinct, and there were 7.3 hectares, went over the site 3 times, and came up with 92 coins. So we're going to compare now the profiles of those sites we've just discussed. Vintry, oops, sorry. Okay, so Vintry, it's got this early start. It's reminiscent, it's an urban place. We have Norman and Anglo-Saxon coins where we don't have them elsewhere. Llanfaes has this strange, well, not strange, this period 5 short cross peak, which then zooms off quite quickly. Dunwich is fairly similar to Llanfaes. South Ferriby, it peaks later in 7, which is the Edwardian material between 1279 and 1351. Bromholm has its peak in 7. I mean, it's a much smaller number of coins. So, I mean, a swing of significance could be made, with the addition of only maybe 20 more finds. So we'll be a bit careful about how we interpret that pattern. And then there's Rendlesham at the end. It's in its profile, it's very much, it's similar to South Ferriby in a lot of ways. So we've compared a little bit Rendlesham with comparative sites, but what about sorry, I just keep clicking because I can't get rid of the bar at the top. It's covering up some of my screen. So Rendlesham, we can compare against the Suffolk mean and the national mean. So this data goes back to my PhD stuff. So the data set was drawn in 2008, so it's actually getting on as being a bit old now. But I think, I think the patterns are probably pretty similar. So all these finds here, you can see on the map on the left-hand side. This shows you where medieval stuff has been recorded from England and Wales. The bigger circles show bigger concentrations of finds from those sites. But you can see the clustering, East Anglia and Essex, Kent coast. Isle of Wight is massively dense, up in the Vale of York, and then this band coming down through Warwickshire, Leicestershire, and so on. The problem with the PS data is, the pilot schemes were only active in 6 counties, so they had a head start on the others. Other places like the Isle of Wight, Frank Basford, who's the finds liaison officer there, he has, I think, amazing relationships and sees almost everything. So the Isle of Wight looks like it's teeming with stuff, and that's because they're recording almost everything that comes up from the detector clubs, which isn't, what's happening all over. But if we compare the Rendlesham material with Suffolk to start with, well, there's the peak in the Edwardian period that we see in Suffolk isn't necessarily replicated. It's much more pronounced for Suffolk generally. And then if we look at the finds from the country, or England and Wales as a whole, we see that is even more pronounced. So that's the sort of big scale stuff. What I wanted to do now is just to focus a little bit on looking at the development of coin loss and therefore potentially coin use in Rendlesham itself over the period here. So this is the first slide, and what we're doing, we're comparing the point data with the choropleth maps, all produced by Stuart Brooks at UCL, who does amazing things with data like this. So there are only 3 finds for the late Anglo-Saxon period. It's nearly 100 years, so there's not a lot going on in this early stage. I'm going to skip period 2 because I don't have the map for that. but we'll go to period 3. Henry I and Stephen. There's an expansion in coin loss. We see, coins appearing over in this area here, and isolated around different parts of the survey area. But it's important to look at the chloropleth. Sort of gives us a little bit of a better sense of how, I suppose, unique or important those finds are relative to other material. So this expansion out here is significant in this period. The TLB coinage, again, not many, but this is fairly typical for what we know about the production and use of money in this period. So here we go with the short cross. This is when it explodes, basically. We can see masses of coins all over many of the fields in the survey area. There's this abundance here in this field. This field sits just behind the church. But, we've got stuff in the south west of the site for the first time. There weren't many before. And there's a big expansion. What we know about the short cross period is there was this growth in coin production, and it was mostly thanks to the expansion of silver mining in Saxony. So there's loads more silver that gets minted into a lot of these Cologne pfennigs produced by the bishops there. We see the spike there, and that kind of diffuses out. So there's more silver to turn into coins, and then the coins are being used in greater numbers in England. A similar pattern when we go to the long cross, which is the period after. There's a lot of them, Edwardian stuff. Yet again, we see these hot spots here, and again in the field behind the church. And it tails off. So this is from Edward III's 4th coinage. Fewer finds. Still, according to the chloropleth, there's still some interesting distributions. And then period 9, similar sorts of numbers. Period 10, again, a similar sort of number of finds. Now, within this data set, there are, I think, some interesting points that we can make. Things that haven't been spoken about or really haven't had the data to prove before. And the main point I want to make is that there's this changing role of coinage in the 12th and the 13th centuries. Now, these pie charts here, these are the pennies, halfpennies and farthings proportions in the TLB short cross and long cross periods. This is the PAS materials. This is stuff I did in my PhD. What we can see, 62% of the TLB coin finds are pennies. In the short cross, this is gone down to less than half, and then by the long cross, only 38% of coins are pennies. Now, why this is important is you don't see this anywhere else, because the hoards don't show this at all. Because if you're hoarding, you're keeping the good stuff. So you will go for the best quality, higher weight and higher denomination things. But what this shows us is that actually fractional use surges in this period, particularly probably after about 1200. If we put similar pie charts for the Rendlesham material, we see it's even more pronounced actually. Now, I'd slightly discount the TLB pie chart here because it's produced from so few coins, and like I said, you could add 5 new finds to that, and it could significantly change the proportions. However, certainly for the short cross and long cross, we have enough that we can be certain that fractional use is really abundant. But I mean, why might this be? I mean, I suppose the question you ask is, what does this show us? Is it a product of an advanced or a backward economy? And but Nick Holmes, who was a numismatist who worked in Edinburgh for a long time, was certain that the diversification and the use of fractional coins was a signifier of a more advanced economy, because money is now filtering down. It's being used in ways that it wasn't before, used for goods and services of smaller values. So don't want to leave without talking a little bit about gold, because although we saw the lovely Anglo-Saxon gold coins. There are a couple of finds of gold from my period, basically. The first of which is this one. Now it's a fraction. It's almost a quarter of a gold rail. It's from the very sort of end of our chronology for the medieval stuff. Whether or not this went into the ground as it looks here is up for debate. I mean, I think the top edge there is fairly well cut. This one, perhaps not so much. This other one, this is much nicer, again from the same period, but it just shows that there are gold coins. Gold coins do get into the plough soil sometimes. And when we talk about gold, we need to really factor this in because in our interpretation, because although we see these abundance, there's so much stuff from the short cross, from the long cross and the Edwardian period. When we actually plot the value of the losses against the number of coins, there's an anomaly that comes out, because after 1350, although we only have we have a much smaller number of finds from that date to this period, the relative value of those things is the highest of all periods, because this is where we've got groats coming in permanently for the first time. We have half groats, 2-penny half groats as well, and then the gold coins, quarter nobles, half nobles, and nobles. So I think it's important to say, I mean, we see this tail dropping off here, but it doesn't mean that suddenly everyone's poor and they're not using coins in the same way. They are using other sorts of coins. So individual finds don't always tell the whole story. One of my favorite subjects is actually to look at the foreign pieces, and I didn't want to leave those out of this talk. There are a lot of foreign coins. Now they're not as exciting, I suppose, as the early stuff with the Byzantine coppers coming in, but what they are is fairly representative of the continental coins that come in the later medieval period. There are Irish coins now and Scottish coins. Now, for the most part, those are allowed to circulate in England at parity. It's only much later that there are, that is discouraged. And they make up probably about 1 to 2% of the single finds, and that is also reflected in the hoards. This piece here, you see, from Florent Gaucher of Châtillon, his coins are the most abundant of what we call the sterling imitations. So the Edwardian pennies are so successful. This is a good high quality silver coin that they are imitated in the Low Countries, parts of the Rhineland, and those coins often end up going back into circulation in England, and they are, they're seen as debased and worthless. There's a lot of kind of rhetoric around how bad they are. They even appear in Chaucer, in Piers Plowman, in a sort of negative sense. The Venetian. So if you look on this is the map. This map is all the PAS stuff I had in my thesis, and the large black dots, black circles, they show you the sort of the most abundant sources for continental coins in England. So as you might expect, there's the Irish stuff, which I just mentioned, Scotland too, but there's Venice as well. And these are these tiny little silver soldini. They were known to contemporaries as galley halfpennies because they came with the annual trading fleets to places like Southampton and Sandwich and London. And they entered circulation because there was a lack of production of small silver. This was a constant problem throughout the medieval period and beyond. Actually, it's the same amount of, if you work at the mint, the same amount of work has to go into producing a penny or a bigger coin than it does for a much smaller coin. So the mints didn't like to produce the small stuff, and there are petitions and complaints all throughout. And then there are solutions like this one, and we see Venetian soldini circulating. They're all over in two phases. And then this is a coin from Guingamp, shows some of the sort of the Anglo-Norman cross-channel land holdings. Often that's what that's representative of. And the last one, this Cavorden coin from Dordrecht. This is really interesting because there are two of these from Rendlesham, and I haven't found them from anywhere else. So I'm assuming they probably, the tiny little things, they probably were circulated as proxies for farthings. But I think it's just interesting for now that we don't see them anywhere else. Oops. So that's most of what I wanted to talk to you about. I think the questions that I was asking, is Rendlesham mundane or extraordinary? I think it's extraordinary in the sense that we have an amazing project which is systematically recording all this stuff. I think what it's showing is actually quite mundane and might be, this is what the medieval countryside looked like. I think the profile shows it's broadly in line with the PAS rural assemblages. I talked a little bit about the denominational structure, about these fractional coins in the short and long cross period, and how we're seeing a very accentuated use of fractions that we don't really know about from other sources. And there's more work to be done actually on the patterns within Rendlesham itself. So I have more work to do. This is an ongoing project. The monograph is coming out, but there's only small amounts of the money stuff in it, and the focus is, as you might expect, on what Andy Woods is working on, the Anglo-Saxon coins. But there's a second estate that the detectorists have started working on, the Sheepshanks estate. So what we'll have is this huge study area of almost like chunks of 2 parishes, and that is what we will be working towards publishing. So I have a lot of things to do. As you can see, I've outlined some of it here. And the question really is how typical Rendlesham is of Suffolk, East Anglia and the UK. So the project monograph will be out soon. And the second monograph we're trying to get together just to look at the numismatic stuff, because there is a little bit of Iron Age. There is some Roman, late Roman particularly. We've got all the Anglo-Saxon stuff, and we have a data set that goes right up to about 1700, and this really deserves its own monograph. So we're going to be working towards that, and that's where I'll be able to develop some more of these ideas. If you want to find out more, I've got this address at the bottom here. There are 10 talks by the main contributors to the project, talking about different aspects of this, and I've been those, and I'd recommend them to you if you want to learn more. Certainly look at beyond the sort of stuff I've talked about the site, about the landscape history, about the metalworking that goes on there. Andy Woods talks about the coins particularly. So there's lots to see. So that's me finished. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll be hopefully able to answer some questions.
Thank you, Richard. That was a really interesting talk. I don't know very much about coinage, and I really enjoyed that. It was yes, there I am.
Thank you.
We've got a couple of questions, if I can find them. I've got one, which was one about, you mentioned in your lists foreign coinage. Today we've got a sort of rate of exchange that goes on. In the old days, was there such a thing, or was it just based on the material of the coin and its weight?
I think both of those things can be true. There was certainly there was an official royal system that said foreign coins need to be changed at the port. So at the point of entry, they will be exchanged at profit to the exchanger for coin of the realm. Part of this was to sort of, as I mentioned, towards the end there, about these continental imitations. There's always a thought that these are kind of debased in some way, because there's a load of different mints, especially the coinage of France and Low Country. It's complex. You have a load of, there's not a one polity that controls coinage. It's, you can have counts and dukes and bishops all doing different things, and often they're in competition for the same silver. So they, it's in their interest to produce a substandard issue so that they can produce more of the money that they want to produce. So there are, I think you have to wait till a bit later to get, tables of exchange. And I think where we see this in the 14th century, 15th century is among the gold coins, because gold seems to operate at a different level. There are, it's the elite, it's aristocracy, and particularly the merchants who have access to gold in the first place. And there are controls of equivalence between, what the value of an imitation noble from the Low Countries might look like versus one from England. So I suppose it's not as prescribed and accessible as we have today, but it certainly did happen. And it was the idea was that they tried to keep the national coinage as pure as possible, but it wasn't always possible. And there were times when certain things were allowed to circulate. So I mentioned the sort of Irish coins. King John has there's a reference to King John saying that the coinage of Ireland as should be exchanged as equivalent to the English. It sort of endorses the use of the Irish stuff. And sometimes the Irish stuff is produced at the mint in London anyway, and the quality is good. This is also the case for Scotland for most of the period, and as we move into the 14th century, the Scottish coins get amazingly debased, and then there's a series of decrees against them to be being used at all.
Thank you very much. A question from Janet Fairweather that says, what is the significance of Tilby after Norman in your chart, please?
Okay, right. Shall I just want to see which chart this is. Okay, are we talking about which chart? Sorry, which chart do you want me to?
Well,
refer?
Yes, we can hear you, Janet.
Can you
Hi,
hear?
Janet.
Yes.
I've really forgotten, but this term came up several times, and I was intrigued by it because I'd been to a place called Tilby, and I can't.
Oh yes, okay, yes, I can answer your question.
Okay.
Yes, right. So of the sort of the coinages, when they're discovered, sometimes if there's a massive find, that type gets the local name. This happens in the Norman period, certainly under Stephen. There's the Albridge type, because there was a massive hoard at Albridge. But Tilby comes from the Tilby that you've been to in Lincolnshire. That's what we're talking about here. Because there was an enormous find, a very early find of these pennies. Now, beyond Tilby, they're not hoarded that often because they're fairly rare. Because we haven't got to that point where we see these masses of silver, massive supplies of silver coming in. So there's in the Short Cross, which around about 1200, which really boosts that. What's interesting about the Tilby hoard is that it was recorded. It's early. It's 18th century, and I think something like 80 or 90% of the Tilby coins were sent to the mint and melted down from this hoard. So what numismatists have had to work with is only a fraction of what's known. So newer finds, yes, they can contribute, but if there was a full record of that massive Tilby hoard, I think we'd have this all the mints and the types, the combinations of monies and so on, we'd have that really set. But at the moment there's still a paucity of evidence because someone decided, all right, that's a load of silver, turn that into crowns and shillings.
Thank you. I suspected it must be something like that, but it's such a tiny place. I just needed to know what it was doing in grand company.
Yeah, a tiny place with a massive hoard.
I've got one from Simon and Colin that says, have you done any analysis of mints moneyers? Does this tell you anything about how local the economy is?
Short answer is not much. The thing is, I suppose the idea of the local, I did some stuff like this in my PhD. I think the problem I encountered was over time there's this, I sort of mentioned, there's the monopolization of coinage to the crown. It occurs very steadily. So yeah, the late Anglo-Saxon period, you've got tons and tons of mints. Normans, similar under William I and II. There's about 70 mints. By the Tilby period, there's fewer. Short Cross, you've got a clutch of maybe 4 or 5 that are producing a lot, and then others that come in and out of use. And by the time you get to Edward I's reign, it's London and it's Canterbury are producing almost anything. So there's very little that can be said. I think that if that question is going to be answered properly, we can do it in the Norman period if we have enough of a sample, and that is something that hopefully I'll be able to look at when we do the pure numismatic monograph for Rendlesham, because it's certainly that is of interest. How many coins is it? Bury St Edmunds that are mostly circulating? Is it, you know, somewhere else? And it would be good to address that. And it'd be good, even if we don't see that localization, I think it'd be, that's another success in terms of, you know, it would sort of suggest that if we don't have local mints represented among others, that we have quite a dynamic and circulating medium moving all over the country, you know, because we do have coins from Durham and Newcastle, Carlisle, elsewhere that come, you know, they are found, you know, in hoards down in Sussex or in the West Country or wherever. But yeah, I can't answer that, but I will hope to answer that in the book.
Okay, thank you. Two more at least. One from me, which is all of those coins that you were finding or have been found at Rendlesham. They're all lost coins? None of them were deliberately buried.
Right. That I think the majority of them are single finds. I mean, how they ended up in the ploughed zones, it can get there in different ways. I suppose there might be some ploughed out archaeological layers from which those coins, I mean, come from. There's always the potential that small hoards could have been ploughed out. I mean, we have. I don't think there's been anything that's suggested to the detectorists that was the case, but I don't think you could entirely rule that out. But the sort of traditional interpretation of how things ended up in the fields is that they are sort of bound up in domestic refuse with all other sorts of material, and then they're distributed around on your arable plots. But there aren't necessarily, I mean, I think there are sort of foci of activity, and I think what we are going to try and look at is to see if we can identify sort of, you know, some principal farmsteads within the area that, you know, much of this material might have been associated with.
Okay, thank you. And last one is from Mr. Parrish. It says, was there a monastery associated with Rendlesham?
No, there wasn't. The other question that we sometimes get answered was there a market there? Because that would go back to your question, Stephen, about how does stuff end up there? Because there are a few sites that we know from the finds that we can kind of say this abundance of stuff here suggests that this is a fair or a marketplace. Sometimes one that might not have been recorded, or at least made official in the records until much later. So I did think about, you know, does the signature, does the patterning suggest a fair or a market? I don't think it does. There are a series of markets pretty local to Rendlesham, where that activity would have taken place, you know, in the later medieval. But no, you know, the sort of sexy side of Rendlesham is very much Anglo-Saxon. It's the association, you know, we've got the high status, you've got the metal working, you've got the links, you know, ultimately with the Sutton Hoo burial. A lot of the sort of sources of the early medieval Rendlesham stuff is similar to what is in the Sutton Hoo burials. But yeah, I think that the sort of questions you can ask of this later material is, you know, what, you know, we've got this amazing set of data. What does it tell us about sort of rural life in medieval England and the use of money? Okay,
thank you. Well, with an absence of any more questions, we'll let you go. But thank you very much for that really interesting talk. I think it was worth waiting just under a year for, certainly, and we've enjoyed it this evening. And hopefully our other members, who I'm sure will be interested, but perhaps I know there's a clash with other things that are going on tonight for some of them who are cathedral guides. They've got things that they've got to go and have to go and watch, but I'm sure they will catch up on YouTube at a later date. So just on behalf of the Society, thank you very much for talking to us. And I just want to give a little message out to the members about our meeting next month, when Donna Martin will be talking about the same site as Bill Franklin spoke to us about last month, but focusing on how young archaeologists and the AHK bursary helped to reveal Roman Bedwell Hay. So I look forward to seeing you then. And again, thank you, Richard, and thank you, members.
Thanks very much for having me. Oh, I should have shown you, I do have some archaeological, this is my trowel. I used to dig before I did coins. So
right.
I should have showed you at the beginning to get everyone on side.
We were on your side anyway.
Thanks very much, everybody. Cheers.
Thank you. All right. Good night, everybody.